afternoon. Welcome to the Awareness Film Festival. My name is Ruby Lopez. I am the co-chair of the Women in Film International Committee, and I will be moderating this panel. I want to welcome you all this afternoon and with our lovely panel. So, I'm sorry, just had to take a deep breath. I would like our panelists to introduce themselves, and if you can tell a little bit about yourself and the film that you have in the festival, and then we'll go on from there. So we'll start this way first. Molly.
Okay. Does this work?
Yes, it should.
Can you guys hear me?
No.
I can. Yeah. I mean, I could just talk loud.
Hi, I'm Molly Herman, and I directed a film called Written Off that is actually playing next weekend on Sunday afternoon. It's my day job is producing historical documentaries for National Geographic, Smithsonian Channel, Discovery. So this is my first feature doc project, which I produced with my business partner, who's also a DP. And it's a story about the opiate crisis, but kind of our goal is to reset people's kind of reset people's thinking about the sort of stigma attached to addiction. So, and it's based on personal journals from a guy who struggled with addiction.
Hi, my name is Harold Mintz. I'm here with the film 1-800 Give Us Your Kidney. And it's a short 15-minute fairy tale. I always tell people it tells the story of how 15 years ago I donated my left kidney this way. Give it to whoever needs it the most. And at the time, there's still not many people doing it, but at the time, I'm not sure anyone had really started asking those questions. And so the filmmaker, when I was approached a couple years ago to do a quick film about it, my first reaction was, if she makes this film, it'll be a tool to get me into more high schools, which is how I donated my time. I speak to kids about to get their driver's license, share my story, and get them to consider maybe signing their license. So sure enough, she completed the film recently, and we're just starting to visit festivals with it. And I knock on wood, it's been well received, and high schools are opening the doors, so it's good. It plays actually right after this in the block at 5 o'clock, so hopefully you guys can stick around and see it.
Hi guys, my name is Esther Ampram, and this is my first feature-length documentary that I produced, and the documentary is about HIV. I don't know what else to say, I'm a little nervous.
I'm Nicole Zwarin, and I directed the film, and I had Esther produce it. It's called Behind the Fear, The Hidden Story of HIV. And I started to get footage for it in 2009, 2010, and I was going to Chapman University. And then I graduated in 2010, and I got a short film version of it in the Awareness Festival in 2010. And then it was called Denialism, The Death of AIDS. And then this is like the feature-length sort of version of it. And it's about people who don't believe HIV is the cause of AIDS, and like what are the alternative causes, and like why do people think HIV causes AIDS, and that kind of thing.
I want to see all your pieces. This is exciting. Hi, my name is Jeremy Kagan. I'm probably the oldest one on this panel. I've been making feature films and movies for television, and I decided as a director and a producer. But the reason I'm here is because I'm also a professor at the University of Southern California. I'm sorry about that. And I created something called the Change-Making Media Lab. And what this is both a research lab and a production facility that makes mostly short pieces for all kinds of NGOs, utilizing what's known as entertainment education. The principle of entertainment education, founded by a man named Sabino in Mexico in the 70s, is that statistically, and this is some of the research we do, a drama or a comedy can often more influence and change behavior than what we would standardly think as an informational documentary. So for example, if you stay to see these movies, there's one we just made for an orthopedic center dealing with pain and why people should be able to choose to actually have knee surgery or hip surgery. And you'll see it's a kind of a comedy drama with all the points that all of the professionals and doctors want to put out there, but done in a way that is essentially using storytelling and entertainment as distinguished from more information. And it's beginning to shift the nature of the way the medical profession is beginning to let their messages go across. So it's called A Knee Up, and if you stay for the films, you'll see that either before or right after one of yours, right after this.
So all of you have created works that have to do with some type of illness. Now, what was why that type of story? What drew you to that story? And is that something in the work that you're going to continue doing? Is that part of your life also? Is addiction, organ donation, HIV, and I'm so sorry, I just forgot.
Well, in this case, we'll just call it a series of illnesses.
Series of illnesses. Series of illnesses. For all of this stuff, is this also driving part of your creative force? Is to highlight different types of illnesses to the general public to get them to have a greater awareness. So let's we'll start this direction and go that way.
Oh, in my case, it's a little different because my interest is media for social change. And if you look at my stuff on IMDb, you'll see both the features and the television work I've done over the last 4 decades represents that. I mean, I have a feature that's coming out that I just finished called Shot, which is about what one bullet does to 3 people's lives. This is a feature that came out in late winter, early spring. So my interest is one that has always been, and the reason I became a filmmaker to begin with was how particularly cinema not only shifts our awareness, but potentially changes our behavior. So I study it, and I make it, and that's why I'm a filmmaker. So it covers lots of ranges of material, but it's always about media for social change.
So I first heard about the topic, the thing that got me interested in this topic about HIV is I heard about it on the radio late one night listening to a program on KPFK, Gary Null on the radio. He's not on that station anymore. And he was interviewing people, and there was one guy who was talking about how he tested positive in the 80s and he refused to take the medication, and that's why he's alive today, because he refused AZT, but his friends were all taking it and his friends died. So that was really fascinating to me, because I always thought that AZT was the life-saving drug for them, and I didn't really know much about HIV. And then I just kind of went down the rabbit hole that way, and I did a lot of research and found out what are the other views about HIV and why are there people who think that it doesn't cause AIDS or that it might not even exist in the human body. And then, so then also I'm interested in doing more documentaries about health, but making one about my sister right now. And she was bipolar, and it's she just happened to kill herself, but I was actually making it before she killed herself. So it might have some stuff in there, that's also regarding health, just involving the medical industry, when it comes to mental health.
Well, the reason I got involved in this project was because my friend Nicole, she made me aware of what was happening about HIV, and I just wanted to get involved and spread the word and about the different views about HIV, and I would like to do more documentaries about health and to spread the word. Yeah.
Organ donation is not something that a few years ago I would have felt is something that I would have been passionate about. I tripped into it accidentally. So, but losing my father at a relatively early age, totally unrelated to kidneys or organ donation, but he passed from some weird combination of cancers the doctors didn't know how to fix. And I think we all, we're not sick, so we all know somebody that has, illness that the doctors don't know how to fix. But it was a few years after my father passed that I started seeing more articles and watching stories about people that are sick, that were dying, and the medical community knew exactly how to fix them. They just didn't have enough parts on the shelf. And so that concept had an interior battle with me. I was not comfortable with the fact, I understand when somebody passes that they don't know how to fix, but I had a hard time coming to grips with people dying. Oh, you're O positive blood? I'll be right back, hang on. Oh, it's empty, come back tomorrow, but you don't have tomorrow. That started circulating in my head a little bit. And again, I didn't know what organ donation was, but I just started asking questions. Be careful with asking questions because you start getting answers that you kind of go, okay, what's the next question? And the next question. So this trail of breadcrumbs led me to being able to make the decision that we could help somebody that was in the exact same situation my family was. You're going to lose your mother unless you can find a part. I got the part. It's not going to affect me. And they all lived happily ever after. That's why I said it's a good story. So anyway, organ donation is not something I was passionate about, but now from the experience that I've had, I understand and I see the results of what that can do. Don't do something nutty that Harold did. Wait till you're gone. You don't need this stuff anymore. Just sign your license and agree to have people be able to use your parts afterwards. And beautiful story. Anyway.
I'm not sure I remember the question.
Basically, the question is why this particular film and why health and illness? And what draws you on the topic, and that's something that you're going to continue on?
I got interested in this sort of addiction story because I have a family story where my cousin died of a heroin overdose when she was 20 years old, about 17 years ago now. And so in my family, it was kind of, it wasn't really, the story wasn't about addiction. The story was about, oh, Emily was crazy, or oh, her parents got divorced, or, it was kind of felt like it was personal. And there really was no sense that she had any kind of disorder or illness. And it would just be sort of like, oh, Emily got arrested, or Emily got pregnant, or Emily died. And after, this issue kind of continued to snowball, and there were so many more ODs, and this heroin, Oxycontin, opioid thing just never seemed to get under control. I started reading about it a couple years ago, and I just sort of had this epiphany myself, like, oh, Emily's story wasn't about crazy Emily, that was an addiction story. That's what was actually wrong with her. So that idea that, like, we sort of, people who end up with this kind of problem, do kind of make themselves sort of despicable and unlovable sometimes. And that's what she was going through, and that's what her family was going through, and that's why it was so easy to sort of miss the forest for the trees or whatever. And so I was really interested in that, and how, if you sort of think everybody who has this addiction problem is culpable, like they sort of deserve it, and that it's a choice, then I just didn't really see how you could kind of work your way out of it. And so I ended up finding this story, and I really loved the character's mom, and we worked on it together. I mean, she really should have like a co-producer credit, and and she sort of helped me understand a lot more about it. But that idea that that sort of stigma problem is what we really wanted to work on. And my main character, who's deceased, he had told all the people at the Walmart where he worked that he had cancer, and they all, lavished attention on him and hugged him and, gave him lots of empathy. And that really struck me. He never got that for what was really wrong with him, which was actually also fatal. And so, I don't know if I would tell more stories exactly like this one, but I'm always looking for sort of that thing you don't, that thing you don't know that's not obvious in sort of a human story. And so, you know, that's what I think is interesting about this project for me.
So what are you guys finding? I mean, like, these types of storytelling, specifically, like, you're focusing on different types of illness and addictions and health. What is the response that you've been getting from, like, audiences, and for people going through addiction, are they relating to it? Are they inspired by, like, Organination? Is the viewpoint changing in the HIV community, or is it something that's still, like, those different points of view, do people not acknowledge them? And then you've done so many different works in different types of illnesses and health ones. Has it changed? Is the audience today more open to watching and learning more about these kind of storytelling and being part of it? So I guess we'll go back
Well,
this direction.
my film has not been really shared publicly, so this is its world premiere next weekend, but we did show some clips at a kind of art festival in Baltimore. And you know, my story is about a kid in rural Wisconsin, and you know, one of my kind of worries was that people wouldn't sort of a white guy story, people wouldn't relate to it. But at this little festival, they brought in a couple busloads of people who were in treatment in inner city Baltimore, all African American, and they loved it, and they really saw themselves in it. And I think I was really happy about that, because it showed me that, like, there's so little that's speaking to that experience in a way that's honest but also respectful, and that kind of gets it. And I think this project, it has the ability to get it because we're really telling it in someone's own words. And so yeah, so I feel like it kind of, you know, jumped those barriers. It was more universal than I had been, you know, wondering if it would be.
I'll do this quick. We've screened at 3 festivals. This will be the 4th festival. And we've signed up at the first 3 festivals, 73 people so far to be organ donors on their driver's license after they pass. And more astoundingly, I've had 2 people that have approached me and asked about how to donate now to somebody, whoever needs it the most. And one of them is in process, and one of them is still asking the questions. I think that's just nutty, but wonderful response to the film.
Question about that one. Is part of your initiative for your film to have, like, these maybe, like, drives or people to sign up or encourage them?
Yeah, good question. So I've said to all the festivals that want access to the film, Samantha, the director, and myself, I said, you can all have the film, but if you want representatives from the film there, you need to schedule us for talks at your local high school, so that it's not just the festival, but so when I go to Minneapolis in a couple weeks, I'm going to 2 high schools while I'm there. When I go back to DC, there's a festival there in a few weeks. The recipients there, I'm there, I'm going to 3 different high schools. So we've asked for them to, the festivals, to put us on the streets. People that come to festivals, you're art lovers, you're here for a reason. You either know the filmmaker or you love films, that's great. And I'll get some of you before you leave. But the high school kids, they're wonderful. If we all have a page that we write on, that's us, here's all the things that I am. That kid, that sophomore in high school's got a blank page for the most part. They're still trying to figure out who they are. And so you tell them a weird, funny, interesting story, and you can actually see it get in on some of them. They're actually moved by it. So I'm not sure if that addresses it.
This is a premiere for our film, so hopefully that we could get a good, get a good response for the film. And
Are you guys active or have reached out to different HIV communities and outreach and support groups?
Well, just we're gonna have a table tomorrow that's for Rethinking AIDS, and we're gonna give out information so you can see, like, what their opinion is about why you shouldn't take an HIV test, and then there's gonna be books out that you can look at.
Say why you should or why you shouldn't take it.
Why you should not take an HIV test. And other than that, I haven't really looked into trying to get other. I mean, it's hard to get other AIDS organizations interested because they would not want this film to get out.
Your film is essentially saying what?
Well, it's just a debate like about HIV. Like there's a debate in science, and it hasn't given enough. I mean, there hasn't really been a voice for the dissident community who don't believe HIV causes AIDS. So it's showing that point of view that nobody really knows about. Like a very few amount of people really know what's been going on under the surface. Yeah.
Does your film deny that HIV does cause AIDS?
Well, it's showing the points of view. It's not like saying this is this or that, but it's showing it.
So since you have a different point, since it sounds like this film has a different point of view from what is the most popular point of view.
Yeah.
Have you had the community who embraces the more popular point of view, have they had a very negative reaction to your film, or has that, since you're just finishing the film right now, you don't know if that reaction is negative or positive yet? Is that what you're
Well,
saying?
actually, the film is up on Amazon, so people can watch it, and they have been reviewing it. And like some people don't like it. Obviously, they think it's like propaganda or something. But I'm just trying to show, the other point of view that like people don't actually see any evidence that HIV is the cause of AIDS.
Okay, great, thank you.
That's pretty gutsy. There are three principles that we seem to have learned, and I think this applies to everybody here and anybody who's making these kind of films. The question is, what's your message? You've got a message. Got it. The second thing is, who are you talking to? And then the third thing is, how do you get it to them? Now, these films are at festivals. I think it's fabulous that you're doing what you're doing in terms of organ donation, because you're actually, that festival audience may not even be inclined to respond. But look at that, it's amazing. What a fabulous thing to be able to say. One of the things and so those three principles become motivating principles on how you do any of this stuff. The example that I'm about to do, I've made a movie essentially about gun violence, and the fact that we're an obsessed culture with gun violence. Who am I talking to? I know that I'm talking to actually what I'll call the choir. But you got to get the choir encouraged just as much as the people who haven't made up their minds, like tomorrow evening's group that are undecided after a year and a half of being exposed to these two particular individuals. But it's often very important to just go after the people who already are decided so that they can be motivated to, in fact, do things. So this particular feature, when it gets released, it's going to, I think, talk to that audience first. But interestingly enough, in terms of the illness and the issues of dealing with health, I want to tell two quick stories so that you can get a perspective. One is the origin of what's called entertainment education, this idea of using dramas and comedies to change behavior as distinguished from using what we'll call the more informational documentary that we're used to. A guy named Miguel Sabido in the 70s took on the idea that there was such illiteracy in Mexico City. And what they did, he got the government to be able to sponsor a soap opera. Soap opera ran for about 5 months. It ran for like 15 minutes, every day. And it was about a family that was illiterate. Father couldn't read, mother couldn't read, the kids couldn't read, so the mother couldn't go to a store and buy food. Kids were back in school, embarrassed and shamed. The father couldn't get good jobs. Inevitably in the story, they start to pursue getting literacy. Now here's the important part of the story. Before this soap opera went on the air, 90,000 people a year would enroll in courses for literacy. After the soap opera went on the air, 900,000 did. So the point is that, particularly when you use drama and comedy, it can seriously influence behavior. We just did one of these things with the Changemaking Media Lab that was called Tamale Lesson, and it was we compared a drama versus a documentary, information documentary about encouraging at-risk women to take pap tests to avoid cervical cancer. The social scientists at USC then took out the films and studied them. And what was interesting was the audience of, this is essentially women, Los Angeles women, at-risk women, so it was poor whites, Asians, Latinos, and African Americans. It turns out that the information that they got from the documentary was equaled by the information they got from the drama. But the motivation to actually go out and take a bad test was statistically almost 10% higher by looking at the drama. So what we're interested in, again, this is a very specific audience. This was shown at lots of health centers all around Los Angeles, and actually Bubbins in San Diego as well. So that was the audience, these at-risk women. And then the research was done to see, in fact, if it was effective. The one that's playing, half an hour, whatever it is, it was made for an orthopedic center. And the object is for people who walk into that center who are considering, like you were talking about, considering something. Do I want to have a knee surgery or not? They can watch on an iPad this little piece to see if it's kind of a dramedy, to see if in fact it relates to them. So again, it's what's your message, who you're talking to, and how do you get it to them.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm really interested in that sort of movement for using media for social change. And last spring, I was invited to a think tank that it happens at Windsor Castle in England, where they have this place where they bring in people interested in the topic. And the woman who runs the MTV's HIV Foundation was there, and she produces a soap opera through Africa that has really shifted condom use, HIV exposure, getting tested, a whole bunch of really incredible
Was it Soul
things.
City? Was it Soul City?
No,
Okay,
no, it's
that's
called
fine.
Suga. A guy who does like a garden makeover show in Africa that's called Shamba Sheka, and so it feels like a home makeover show, like that we would enjoy, except for that it's teaching gardening skills. The producer of Girl Rising, a lot of people were there, and we talked a lot about the kind of sort of entertainment versus kind of factual documentary. And as a documentary producer, I think, right, if you're talking to an audience that adores telenovelas, your best bet might be a telenovela. But I think that really it's the emotional experience of whatever the work is. And something I've heard over and over again about my project is that I should tell multiple stories and I should have experts in it. And I talk to experts for films for a living. And what was really exciting about producing this film was that I was talking to people about the thing they cared about the most, not their academic expertise. And it was a really different experience producing it. But I think it's a ride that's like a drama. It's true, but my rule was, my main character's name was Matt, and if you didn't know Matt, you can't be in the movie. And so, I talked to the police officer that arrested him, I talked to his boss who fired him, I talked to his mother and his girlfriend, and his best friend, and his friend from prison, and, but if you didn't know Matt, you couldn't be in the movie. And I think what that does is creates this, in this case, it created this really kind of emotional, real thing that isn't what you think of when you think of a documentary with a bunch of talking heads. And so I think there's multiple different ways to do that, I guess is
The phrase I like to use is facts inform, stories transform. And a story could be, obviously, in a documentary. It doesn't have to be in a drama or a comedy. Good docs all from our stories, like yours really is.
I have a friend who I used to work with on a bunch of short films for Head Start, and he would always say, this should be in the brochure.
So I just want to go a little bit into, your storytelling process for each of you. So Mom, we'll start with you. You were saying that, you approached this story, they had to know your main character. What made you decide that was the way to do it? Like, why, what was the light bulb in order to do this, especially when you were developing this addiction story?
Well, for me, I think that's the way I'm always looking for the human story. I'm making a thing about building a telescope, I'm looking for the human story. I'm looking about a thing, one of my first solo producing paid jobs was about warehouse technology, and I filmed in the middle of the night in a warehouse in Michigan in the winter. And but I'll be damned if this technology didn't change these people's lives, because they went from walking down the aisles, squinting at a list, and pulling out 2 packs of hot fries to send to 7-Eleven, to typing in a code and having the lights light up all the way down so they could do it and grab them quick and move on and do twice as much. And it was like weird, right? So there's always, what I feel. But with this specific topic, I was just really dissatisfied with the coverage that was out there. And it seemed to me to be that every time I'd open
Excuse me, when you say coverage out there, coverage with dealing with addiction and storytelling?
specifically dealing with the opiate crisis. So the reporting, the stuff that I'd seen, the films that I'd seen, were all doing this same thing, which was, you'd look at the homepage of the New York Times and there'd be some mugshot of some, messed up looking suburban mom whose life had just gone down the toilet, right? It was the same story over and over again. And I'm not sure what people were supposed to think about that or do about that, but that's a real dead-end way to tell a story. And the other kind of thing that happens in documentary film, and there was a film on HBO recently, and I don't know the filmmakers, but which is like several different stories of great lives down the toilet. And also they tend to include a lot of instructional drug use, which I think is really counterproductive. And so I just didn't feel like everybody was telling the story from the outside, and everybody was telling the story from like a place where you could sort of sit watching it and think about how you were a little glad it wasn't you, and how you're pretty sure it never would be you or anybody you know, except for that it's actually like you do know these people. Like
You probably know other people like that as well. So,
So I wanted to tell a story, and I like the idea of it being based on a diary that was like very inside, and it's really warts and all. Like my character, we struggle to make him likable. Honestly, it's a little bit. We're always like going back to the baby pictures because But
yeah, that's a fine line when you have a main character you're not sure your audience will connect with.
right, and it's important to not feel like you want to write him off, right? But understand, like to me, the big lesson is how hard he had to work to support his addiction and stay alive for as long as he did. How much harder, much more grit he had, and it's the exact opposite of what you think about addiction, which is that people are just sort of lazy partiers. And so that's the thing I wanted to get across.
Great, thank you very much. So Harold, for this film, were you approached by the filmmaker? Or did you approach filmmakers? And how did the evolution for this, to start this whole endeavor, and now it's grown to an extent where you're able to encourage people to be an organ donor?
Yeah, I want to give you an interesting answer, not a boring answer. First of all, everybody up here, if you're working on documentaries, I think you might have mentioned it, Jeremy, but emotions. If it's information, it bounces off people and they don't remember by the time they get to their car. But if you touch emotions, if it's a story told with emotion or find something, some thread in it that touches you, that is where change begins. So it's Morgan, right? I was talking to Morgan right beforehand. She's has a film about dementia and Alzheimer's. Now, if you don't have a family member or know somebody who's suffering from that, it's informational. If you remember Uncle Al, or you think about somebody and you know somebody, it gets in deeper. There was a documentary a few years ago we were talking about called Alive Inside, and it's bringing you into a very personal look at people suffering with dementia, and when they put headphones on them and play music from their youth, I'm tingling as I tell you this, they light up and they wake up. I'm sure that's not every time, but you watch this and you don't know these people, but now it's no longer information, now it's emotional, and it's just a beautiful story. So what we were very interested in with our film was not giving information, but being able to get emotions into people, because that's where the dial moves. And so what I think this filmmaker did very successfully is, I'm kind of bored with my story. I know I've been telling it for 15 years, but when I saw the film for the first time and I saw what she captured from my recipient and her husband, I've watched it now 15 times and I've shed a tear each time I've seen it, because she was able to pull things from them. Obviously, I'm intimately involved in the story, but I think she did a wonderful job, the audiences that I've talked to, making it emotional. And I think that's how any of these stories can push forward.
Well, that was interesting because it's part of, like you said, it's based on your story. But when you were working with these filmmakers, was How did you know that they were the right one to tell this story? Was it because they were focusing very much on the human experience and the emotions?
Well, it's because she asked. I didn't have a line of filmmakers saying, hey, can I have access to your story? There was not a bidding war. For me, again, it's a tool. It's a tool that I can use to get into more high schools. So she asked first, I blessed it immediately. She heard me give the talk. She didn't come to me blindly. I work with a filmmaker who's also a professor at some universities. She took his class, heard me speak, and approached me immediately afterwards. So we had a relationship, teacher, student kind of thing. So it was kind of easy.
Great, thank you. And then for your feature film, you said this was also based on a short, that it started off as a short concept and then you grew it to a feature. What made you want to have it as a feature? Why did you grow it from a short to a feature for this particular topic? Was there something that, was your short missing something that you felt that a feature would be necessary to go beyond that?
Well, because I did it as a class project.
The short.
Yeah, the short film. It was for a documentary class. And I had gone to the Rethinking AIDS conference in Oakland in 2009 where I got a lot of footage. And I just, got a lot of interviews, and besides the fact that when I would show the film to people, a lot of times people would get confused, like they would have more questions and stuff. So besides that.
Excuse me, when you said people got confused, what were they specifically confused about that made you
Or not
realize?
necessarily confused, but it's just like it kind of went over their head, like just like explaining, these people's points of view, and like explaining, like Peter Duisberg, I interviewed him. He's a scientist who's a professor at Berkeley, and he says that retroviruses are harmless and HIV is a retrovirus. And we have like hundreds of retroviruses in our body. So it's just a harmless passenger virus. So like, I don't know, people just wouldn't understand it. Like, that's just an example, but, so I just wanted to expand on that and show more points of view too.
So was that the expansion, like you said, you expanded from the short, so your expansion, you had decided that it was specifically going to be expanded with multiple points of view and multiple stories about this particular topic? Or did you try different things and then this is how it developed?
Wait, what was the question again?
The development process. So you went for the short, you said you were trying to address some of the questions and concerns or what went over people's heads for it. So when you were developing that story, were you looking for more experts? What was the process that made you decide this is the right path to help address those questions that people were?
Well, I guess I kind of had something, I just wrote down my own voiceover, and I actually made another film before I made this film, but I didn't release it, and I showed it to a test audience, and they had a lot of feedback, so I changed it, and I did a completely different film with a different name. But it took a really long time because I was just trying to get it so that it made sense to the average viewer, and I think still, when people watch it now, they're gonna have to watch it a few times to really understand everything, because there's a lot of scientific information in there. But I was just trying to get it in a structure so that people could wrap their head around it more.
So have the concept and the idea. I see. Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
And Jeremy, for your short that's coming out, what was the evolution for what was this, why this particular topic, and where is it going? How are you planning to grow it?
In the case of the Change-Making Media Lab, which is very specific, we approach people, but people approach us. So there was a grant from the National Institute of Health trying to deal with the issues of women's health. The people involved in that actually were SC people from the Kent School of Medicine, and they came to us. So the dialogue where I think in all of your cases, you initiated the projects more or less. These were projects that came to us, and then there's a different kind of dialogue that goes on with the filmmaker at that point, because there's a message that these people have. And now the question is, can we get that message out so it's most effective. And as you know, everybody in the world is a filmmaker, so oftentimes the scientists and the doctors don't necessarily know what's going to be most effective in getting their message out. So we have to go through a dialogue and oftentimes convince them, and oftentimes, like with a film that we make for a studio, is screen it for people just to get them to see, oh yes, this works. In the case of this particular one, an orthopedic center who had seen some of the other pieces we did a piece on ADHD for a psychiatric center that won a lot of prizes, and they'd seen that, and so they came to us and said, we want to do it. And interestingly enough, they wanted to do a documentary. They wanted to do an informational documentary that tells people about why they shouldn't be afraid of having knee surgery. And we were able to convince them that a drama was more effective. But part of the elements of these drama, this is based on entertainment education, this is an interesting concept, which is you want a character that doesn't want to do whatever it is that these people are advancing. You want a character in it that already has done it or wants to do it. And then you wanted that person in between. And so when you create those three characters and they have dialogue together, whether it's emotional confrontation or intellectual whatever is going on between them, then the issues then get brought up. And they get brought up because of characters in conflict. And so the drama between these characters in conflict allows the viewer to say, hey, I'm the guy who doesn't want to do this, so I have something to identify with, but I see the choices. Or I'm the guy who's already convinced, or gal is already convinced. Or I'm, as usual, the person in between. And so we structured a drama. I had a wonderful writer write that particular piece for us. We then had to run it by the doctors. We got a little technical information, we didn't say this word right or whatever it is. Luckily, they didn't try to rewrite the drama. Now they have it, and we'll see how they use it. So it goes through an evolution.
Great, thank you. Harold, you said,
I'm sorry, keep with Jeremy, because I have a question. I cheated, and I saw your film a few days ago. I went online and was able to see it. I know what the desired result of that is, hopefully to convince somebody who might need that particular surgery to have that surgery. But how do you get that? Where does that audience come from?
In this case, it was being very specific. What happens is a lot of people, as with any of us, particularly if you're going to do something that's more or less elective, you're in pain, but you're not sure you want to do it, you usually go to a doctor's office. And the doctor convinces you through, the idea here was, hey, why don't you take 12 minutes and look at this thing on the iPad, and then we'll talk afterwards. So that's what's going on in this particular orthopedic center, and they're testing it now.
But in this particular case, if that patient is in the doctor's office, aren't they already predisposed to have the surgery?
Oftentimes not. That's one of the reasons why they approach us, because particularly in this case, they want to find out, they're going to check it out, they have their first meeting. And also one of the things they were interested in was, if you saw the piece, it's also good for somebody who actually has or is about to, because they get told, even though they're going to do it, how much pain they're probably going to be in, what's going to happen afterwards, how quickly they may heal. All of those things are part of the facts in it. So it's good for both the person who's made the decision and the person who is thinking about it. That's where their brains are.
Last question. Is there a way with that particular film to gauge success?
Yes, there is, but that's social science. And it's interesting because it's really, and we're very interested in that. But right now, the doctors are sort of in between about whether they want to actually spend a little money to do the social science. The one that I was talking about with the Pap test with women, that there was real money and time invested in finding out whether these things were effective. So you can do it, but it does require research.
Well, I have someone for your film and someone for your friend's kidney, so please talk to me afterwards.
Someone you know who needs these. I saw that.
Yeah. So I want to open this up to questions from the audience. Does anybody have a question? And who is your question for, or is it for the general panelist?
It's actually specifically for Jeremy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi. I recently made a film. It's showing on Monday night. It's called A Favor, if you want to check it out. And
What time is it?
oh, it's in the 5 to 7 block. It's a short film. This film deals both with Alzheimer's and aided death. And something that happened a lot during the pre-production process was a lot of pushback. And I was wondering, and sometimes I wonder if like maybe it was a doc or something along those lines, that would have happened less. So with your experience in creating social change through a narrative. Have you experienced that? Like, have you overcome that?
Interesting enough, when you're doing a narrative with the professional doctors, because they really don't know really that form, you have a little more leeway. This is what I found so far, because they're sort of trusting that you know how to make a drama or a comedy.
Yeah.
They know the facts. So what they often do in these cases, in the 5 that we've done so far, they want to make sure we got the facts right. But they're not really sort of, gee, I don't know, I
Yeah.
like the casting. They stay away. And there's an interesting dialogue that comes from a group, and for those of you who make these kind of films, it's a group up north, and it's called Prenups, and you can look it up online. And it's a fabulous sort of 5-page document to be had with the experts, financiers, doctors, and the artist. And it's a dialogue saying, what's going to be your responsibility? Meaning you're the factual guys or gals. What's going to be the creative artist's response? And you make an agreement early on so that they don't suddenly become, well, I'm a filmmaker too, and you shouldn't use a wide shot, not a long, and how come you're using this medium? They stay away. But you need to make that agreement before you start.
And with that also, continuing with the pushback, did you have any as far as like maybe actors or locations? That was a big thing for us, is like we've had actors back out of the auditions, we had locations drop on us because they were hesitant to support something such as aid, or even just be involved in something such as aided death.
Usually if you're paying them, they're usually fine. But if you're asking and you're not paying them a lot, even when you run into this problem, you can run into this problem all the time. My students do all the time.
Yeah, it was like every corner was like,
You really, those people who don't want to play with you, you shouldn't be playing with them. So it's good that the people who are sort of iffy withdraw so that you can get people who care and passionate about it.
Yeah.
It just means it takes time.
Yeah, you should always be, like, if you're doing something that you think is controversial, you should be super upfront about it.
Oh yeah, that was like in the first line of like every email or phone call or something.
Yeah, but he's right that if you pay people, even if you pay somebody $50, it feels like a contract and they're more responsible. They're more reliable.
Yeah. Thank you.
Of course.
And also a follow-up to that question. So did any of you in your films, did you get any pushback from anybody, from people who were, and I guess like how did you deal with the pushback?
Well, I'll just say quickly that, I think that as much as you sort of think you know about something, you, as a filmmaker, you have to kind of know that when you are trying to get into a world, you're going to discover that you're dumb about some things. And so, I learned a lot of things about how addiction is talked about, and it's sort of new.
In terms of, you mean the language of it?
Yeah, and I mean, language, like getting people to use the right language is sort of free.
Can you give an example? Because
Yeah.
I'm not sure people understand what language in addiction actually means.
Right, so people don't say addict anymore. People don't label people struggling with addiction as addicts. And who knew? Did anybody know that? No, I didn't either. I did a series for the Smithsonian Channel about slavery. People don't say slaves anymore. People say enslaved people. And if you think about it, it sounds dumb, right? We've always said that. But actually, if you think about it, that is kind of a crappy label, right? And so I'm just reduced to being an addict or a slave. I didn't ask to be either one of those things. So that's interesting. That's like the kind of thing I feel like you find out as you sort of start this journey.
What's the phrase for addicts now?
Person struggling with addiction, person dealing with addiction.
It's quite much longer, so.
Yeah, well, it's the same argument they made about saying he or she, but we do it. So yeah, it's not as convenient, but I find that it does reframe your own thinking in a way that's actually important. And I'm really not like a super PC, pain in the ass thinker like that, but it does change the way that you think. It does change the sort of, like you would say, even though it's long, you would say person with cancer.
I realize that I actually have been using that language the last couple of years and did not realize
Me neither.
how unconscious that is, and that I have not used addiction for an addict, that terminology for a long time. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yeah.
interesting.
Or, the other one is that in my film, a couple of the people, and I think this is forgivable in terms of a piece of, journalistic art, people who knew my character used the word junkie. And you know, that's obviously like the addict thing to the whatever nth degree. But I think we use it in the film as like to emphasize the point, which I think is also fine. You know, it's sort of like how if we're using it intentionally, I think it's fine. But anyway, that's like once you start to get into something, you do start to really realize that you're not an expert on it, and it's super important to listen to people who really do know.
So what about your pushback, and how did you guys deal with any pushbacks in terms of when you were approaching people?
Wait,
Or
what
people?
does pushback mean? I don't know.
Basically resistance to the film, or people you approach who decided that they didn't want to be a part of it, and for you.
Yeah, we did have some pushback. I had a couple people who like threatened. Well, no, was it 2 people or 1 person who threatened to sue me? I don't remember. But it was weird because like he was really down for it when we were filming him, and then he didn't even see the film, but I just told him like, oh yeah, I want to send it to you so you can see it, and then he just said like he needs to be taken out of it because he's a gay guy who's HIV positive and his lover died, and it's about him and his lover who are HIV positive. And now he's dating like somebody who's like powerful in the medical industry or something. He doesn't want that to get out because then that could ruin his lover's reputation. Then I showed him the film and he's like, oh no, never mind, like it's so good. Like, I don't know, it's weird. Because he was really threatening to sue me. Even though he had signed the form that said that he couldn't sue me. And then there's another guy who I filmed, and he used to think that HIV didn't cause AIDS, and he was very passionate about it, and he was HIV positive, and his wife was also, and she had a baby. They had a baby together that they were forced to give the drug AZT to, because even though the baby was testing negative, Child Protective Services could have taken the baby away if they refused to give the drug because the mother tested positive. So the mother was also taking AZT intravenously while she was pregnant. So I thought it was like a really interesting story, and you know, it was important to tell. But he was just like outraged because he totally changed his opinion, and he believes that HIV causes AIDS now, and he's taking the medication, and his wife is taking the medication because his wife was having problems with this pneumonia that she kept getting and stuff, so she took the medication and they got rid of the pneumonia. So that's one thing. Like he wrote like a really long review that I didn't even read the whole thing on Amazon about why my film, like he said like he told me to take it out and I should have taken it out, but he actually never told me to take it out. So I don't know why he wrote that up there.
What's the is there a harm in taking AZT? Is that what your film says, or is there a reason?
There is a harm. Well, it was initially a very high dosage that was prescribed, and now they've lowered it a lot to like a much safer level. It's still in about 25% of the drugs, but it still kills like all the cells in your body. It just indiscriminately kills cells.
And if HIV doesn't cause AIDS, do you talk about what is it that causes AIDS?
Yeah, there's a lot of options, and there's like a theory that there's like multiple different things that was causing these gay men to be sick in the early 80s. Yeah, it was like a lot of it had to do with lifestyle activities.
Like what?
Drug usage, poppers, douching, she knows. Well, you have to see the film.
I was going to say, come and see the film and learn all about it. Is there any other questions? Hold on. And who is this addressed to, or is this a general panel?
Nicole.
Is this for Nicole?
Hi, Nicole. I've seen a lot of the footage that Nicole has that didn't make it into the film, as well as a lot of the footage that did, because I gave her some suggestions. And what's interesting is that the question about facts versus emotions, I think, really plays very strongly into your film, because you really do have to get across a lot of factual material. And, I kept saying, save it for the DVD, but you still get a lot of factual material in and do it rather skillfully. But the film really comes alive, in my opinion, right at the beginning and right at the end when you let it breathe and get emotional. So, I just wanted to say that I think you've got a good balance, and have dealt with a situation where you did have to do a lot of fact checking. Also,
I'm sorry, what's your question?
well,
Well, he helped me also write some of the voiceover.
Okay.
And
the individuals, yeah. If you can share with, those of us here, do you think it's a good idea to keep working with your interviewees until you can get them into a more emotional place? Because, when I see an interviewee who is just stating fairly dry information, it's kind of like I start to blink. And there are cases within your film where people who start off very dry suddenly do get emotional, and all of a sudden it comes alive. And what techniques would you suggest as far as interviewing to bring that emotional content out?
I don't know what part you're referring to.
So, I mean, basically, but I believe what he's just trying to ask, and this is also a good question for everyone here, is that when you are interviewing someone in a film, especially about health, is how do you get them to show them who they are rather than having just basically, like, I guess, a very dry answer. So is there anything in particular you did beforehand with your interviewer? Like, did you meet them beforehand? Did you prep them? What kind of questions? How did you get a little bit more of their personality come across?
I was not sure who you're talking about in the film. Like, was it like a scientist or was it more of like one of the patients?
It's just general
both the
for
patients and
anybody.
the scientists, actually.
It's anybody you would like to like.
I mean,
You
there's.
have an interview technique.
Well, I mean, some of them, the patients, I would talk to them a lot beforehand. Some of them I had just met because I went to the AIDS conference in 2012 in Washington, D.C. And I met this one guy who's holding up a sign that said, "Stop Suicide," and he had a shirt that said, "I have AIDS." And, like, I started talking to him about suicide because my sister committed suicide. And, like, we just really connected, and he believes HIV causes AIDS, and he has AIDS. I mean, didn't have AIDS, he has HIV. Yeah, I told him that.
So you created a personal connection with
Yeah.
the person you were interviewing in the end.
Yeah,
Okay.
but I don't always do that. But I mean, I guess it's a good thing to do. Yeah.
And I guess for the rest of
Just
anybody
real
in the
quickly,
past.
it's directly answering that question. I've seen it now a bunch of times. Some of the best interviewers just know when to shut up. So you have a microphone on somebody, you've asked them a question, and what comes out might be dry, but don't say anything, because they usually are comfortable with that uncomfortable silence, and then they'll add things that tend to get a little bit more emotional. So just give it enough time, enough air, let somebody talk and continue talking. It's worked well for us.
There's another technique too, which is another technique is to not talk about the subject, talk about something else. Something unrelated, like, where'd you get your t-shirt? Is that a t-shirt? What is that? And all of a sudden you started to laugh, and now if I started to ask you more questions about, are you a t-shirt, whatever, something might open up. So that's another technique that sometimes works.
I think that sort of building a relationship, and not so much with maybe an expert, where it really wouldn't be appropriate necessarily for an expert to be, to cry, say. But there's sort of a time and a place. But building a relationship with a subject and becoming someone they can really trust, you have so much power as a filmmaker. I literally could put your words together in any way I wanted to make you say anything I wanted with a good editor and a good sound mixer. I don't think people really realize that, but it's totally true. I could have you say anything. And so, of course, I wouldn't. And my litmus test for even, shortening what somebody said is, would they know? Would they remember they didn't say it exactly that way? Would they remember that in that middle of that good story, they threw in something random about their college roommate that just can't be in the film and I cut it out? No, they don't remember. So if people don't recognize what they said to you as their words, then you've done something wrong, I think. But yeah, I mean, I've done WannaCry, and I don't think that like boo-hooing is really very emotional anyway. People who are really on the brink of crying is a much more kind of emotional situation, a pregnant situation. We would take a lot of breaks and go outside for a cigarette, come back in, whatever. I one time did a whole day of interviewing people about people who had lost family members to pancreatic cancer. And oh my God, it was so hard to talk about it without just constant crying, which in that case was, we were trying to make sort of chipper, go Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, support videos, and crying just wasn't helpful. Everybody knows it's sad, and it was really hard, and you just have to have a really good sense for sort of people and where they are, and I don't ever do interviews with, I might have a list of questions, but I almost never look at it. I'll look at it at the very end to see if I missed anything. And I don't worry too much about whether somebody's saying something just right. I feel like we can fix it, or I can write into it, or we can make it work. And it's just much better for it to be a conversation.
What do you do with the person who wants to say it right?
The question was, if somebody wants to say it right, do you, if they want to say it again and film it again, are you open to that?
Oh yeah, I mean, you mean like they don't agree with what they said?
No. I mean, some people actually, particularly when you're dealing even more with experts, they really do want to say it right, and they'll not quite say it right, and you and I know that's going to be fine, but they don't, so they get, can I say it again? I just want to,
Yeah.
I haven't got it right.
I always let people say it again. What I find is, in my feature doc, there's no narration other than diary entries, and so everything comes from the interviews, which is actually really a lot, a much harder way to tell a story. If I can write narration, I'm never gonna, if somebody thinks they got a date wrong, I usually say, we can do it again, but don't worry about it. I'm never gonna waste you telling me a date. That goes in narration. So what I want is somebody who's interesting, who's emotional, who's telling me something someone else couldn't bring to the film, who's sharing some expertise that is, the main thing about interviews is that whatever people say needs to be appropriate to the person who's saying it. So, that's just to me, that's just a rule, I don't know, but yeah, sorry, did you have a question?
Yeah, well, I think we're kind of misinterpreting a little bit of what I was talking about. What I wanted to get at is, if, say, you're dealing with an expert and they're coming across dry, but you can sense that they do have a strong opinion, is it ever kosher to deliberately bait them? In other words, go against maybe your own opinion, but to argue with them in order to get that emotional side out of them.
So are you asking, just to clarify, are you asking, is it good for the project, for the storytelling, to try to get a particular reaction from an expert or even an interviewee? It's not an expert.
To get them stronger in...
You want a stronger reaction.
reaction.
You're looking for a stronger reaction, and you're trying to get them to be an even stronger reaction than what they're having.
Yeah, well, a lot of times people really want to dance around something and they don't want to hit on it because they're afraid they're going to cry or whatever, or they, I think it's perfectly fine to be direct and to pin people down and make them talk about the thing you agreed to sit down and talk about. But at the end of the day, you don't want somebody who doesn't agree with what they said. You don't want somebody who doesn't agree with the way they're presented in a film. And that's not the way I do business. So I'm sure it happens, but you don't want to provoke somebody to the point where they say something that's out of character or something they don't agree with, or you're not able to get anybody's trust.
Well, for me, that was just about making them say what they believe, but say it in a stronger way.
Well, actually, there is one guy that I wanted to speak more strongly about things, because I had seen him on other shows and interviews where he was really, very passionate, and then when I got to New York where he lives and I was interviewing him, he was talking very slow and like very methodically. And I was like, I don't know how this is gonna turn out, you know, but I just wanted him to be like,
I do have a tip for that, which is if someone's
I
really
didn't do anything.
if someone's really quiet, I talk really loud. If you can set the tone of an interview. So if you're like, okay, well, let's talk. And if you're like, all right, great, I'm so glad you're here. Let's talk, let's do this. You know, people will rise to the occasion and people will get their own energy up. And if you create an energized situation, I mean, I don't want to bully people, but if you can actually set the tone, you can be like, why are we whispering? You can be funny, you can do whatever you want. You know, I don't think, nobody wants to be boring on TV. Nobody wants to give a bad
When
performance.
did you learn that? I like what you just said. When did you learn that?
I don't know, out of desperation at some point.
No, that's a great tip.
Sure, it's still on.
Did you have,
Yeah, I
did
just
you have a
wanna
tip
say
as
that
well?
A lot of the people that we interviewed, they were passionate. They wanted to share their story. So we felt like we didn't have to try hard when we were interviewing them. They were already sharing their emotions because they really wanted to be part of this film and they just wanted to share everything. So we never had a problem interviewing them. Like, not all of them. Yeah, for the most part. Yeah.
That's great. So I believe we have time for one last question. Does anybody?
Hi, this question is for Harold. In your travels with this film, have you met people like you or people in the transplant community? Have they come up to you after your screening?
It's a good question. So, as I said, we've only had 3 or 4 different festival audience groups. I have not met at these screenings other what they call non-designated donors, but afterwards I've been swamped because it's like when you buy a red car. Once you buy your red card, then you look on the street and everybody's got a red card. So if you see a movie about organ donation, anybody in that audience that has an uncle or a brother or a sister, they find their way to me afterwards, and there's connections all over the place. But Rachel, who asked the question, is also somebody who gave her a kidney to somebody whoever needed it the most. A couple months ago, we were at a cocktail reception, and there were 4 non-designated kidney donors at this party, which is outrageous. There's only been, in 16 years, I think there's only been about 1,500 people that have raised their hand and kind of done this nutty thing. But there's a lot of people related to organ donation, but not a whole lot of non-designated donors. And before I pass up the microphone and you close things out, there is a table
Oh,
outside.
actually, I was actually going to ask her to give a little intro about her organization. So just so you know, there are a couple of organizations that are coming to the festival with different missions and support, and this organization is one of them. So I would like to invite you to tell the audience a little bit about them and how they can be part of it.
Sure, thank you. My name is Rachel. This is my colleague Maria. And we are One Legacy ambassadors. One Legacy is the organ procurement organization here in Southern California that works to promote and support organ and tissue donation, education, awareness, and speaking with families when their loved ones pass away. And so Maria and I are here today to share that information with you. We have a table downstairs. We can also automatically register you to be an organ donor if you aren't already. And we're happy to share our stories with you on how organ donation has impacted us. I myself am a donor niece and a kidney donor.
And I'm a liver transplant recipient.
Wow.
So we work together all across Southern California to educate and promote organ donation. So please join us. Thank you.
It worked.
Great.
So far.
That's so great.
Great, thank you very much. And I just want to have all the panelists go down the line and let people know what time their film is showing, date and time of what their film is showing. And I encourage you all to please, if you have a chance, come and watch their film, and encourage other people to do it as well.
So my film's called Written Off, and it's playing on Sunday the 16th, so a week from tomorrow at 4 o'clock.
1-800-GIVE-US-YOUR-KIDNEY's playing in about 13 minutes in this theater.
What? Oh, not this theater. Okay, Mine is Behind the Fear, the Hidden Story of HIV is playing tomorrow night at 9 p.m. And Ed Asner's gonna be introducing it because he was the voiceover narrator. He's gonna help me introduce the film.
Wow.
Tomorrow 9 p.m.
And Shot will be in your, no, that's not the one I'm pushing. Actually, the one is pushing, because that's what we've been doing this last year. But look for it in this theater in the spring. Ania is going to be playing, I guess, next to yours, or before or after right now. Wherever is it this theater or the next theater? The next theater,
both
14.
seats are being used, so I believe.
Yeah, I think it's the next theater. But for those of you, if you don't get to see this, Ania, you can actually see Ania probably by just typing it in, and it'll come up on the internet. If not, if you go to a thing, if you can remember it, the Change Making Media Lab. If you type the Change Making Media Lab in as one word, it'll come up as well. You'll see Ania.
I found it on the Awareness Festivals page talking about your film. There was a link that took me to it.
Oh, cool. Well, there
And
you have it.
And like all the films usually have a website.
And I want to know if it influences you to decide to do this. You're my test.
Also, I believe there's another filmmaker here. Is there any other filmmakers here who are showing festival?
Yeah.
So you give up a little plug.
Yeah, like I mentioned before, Monday night at in the 5 to 7 block, A Favor deals with a millennial working a dead-end job at a restaurant who meets one of her patrons that asks to meet her in a park, and a life-altering thing happens.
Great. And then just for me, I just want to let you know, stop by the VR experience. We are showing a couple of experiences this weekend and next weekend. And also Women in Film International Committee is supporting 4 women-directed films. But please support all the films, and please enjoy and have a great day and great evening of films to be seen.
Thank you.